Welcome our dear student of second prep in a new episode of مدرسة على الهوا. Today inshallah we are going to start a new unit, the last unit in our syllabus, and the first lesson, fossils. Okay, first of all, what's meant by fossils, the name of the lesson, and we are going to discuss the types of the fossil and the importance of fossils in our life. First, what's meant by fossil? As we know that we have an old living organism have been lived in the earth a long time ago, like dinosaurs, okay, which is a true element, a true animal, lived a million ago in the earth. So how we know that this living organism lived on earth from hundreds of millions by its remain or by its trace. So what's meant by fossil? It is a trace or remain of an old living organism. Again, fossils mean trace or remain of an old living organism. What's meant by trace and what's meant by remain? Trace, if the dinosaur move on a sedimentary soil, it will leave its footprint. So the footprint is a proof for the activity of this living organism, and this is what we call it trace. The tunnels of the worm, this indicate the activity of the living organism, so we call it trace. Trace is the proof or indicate the activity of the living organism. Remain is a part of the living organism itself. We have a skull of dinosaur, a skeleton of the whale, the tooth of a shark. This is a remain, part of the organism itself, still kept after this million years. First we have fossils. Definition of the fossil, it is remain or trace of living organism that have been extinct. It's not living anymore. What's meant by trace? It indicates the activity of the living organism. What's meant by remains? It proves that part of the living organism or an organ of the living organism. So how many types of fossil we have? We have 4 types. Number 1, complete fossil. Number 2, mold. Number 3, cast, and petrified fossil. Okay, let's start, we see together. Okay, this is our lesson, fossil. And this is the definition. Fossils, they are traces and remains of old organisms that are preserved in sedimentary rocks. And why sedimentary rocks? Because it is kept inside it without decaying or decomposing. Okay, the microorganism didn't act on it. Okay, and now trace, like the fingerprint, the footprint of the dinosaur. This is a footprint, okay, of dinosaur. So it indicates the activity of once an old living organism during its life, during its motion, during its activity, and this is the trace, not a part of the organism. Okay, example, dinosaur footprint, the shell, and the worm tunnels. This is a trace. Remains, what's meant by remains? This is a remain, a skull of dinosaur. The bone itself is found. Okay, this is a tooth of shark. I have the tooth of the shark. So it is part of the living organism. Parts indicate the remains of once an old living organism after death. So we have fossils, trace, and remains. Let's start the types of fossils. Number 1, we have 4 types: fossils of complete, mold and cast, and petrified fossils. Have we seen from the picture? Example of the complete fossil is the mouse, mold and cast, and petrified fossil. Now let's see what's meant by complete fossil. Mouse fossil. Okay, now we are going to discuss the type of the fossil. Number 1, complete fossil. What's meant by complete fossil? We have 2 examples in our book. The first example is the mammoth. The mouse is an animal that lived 35 million years ago. It looks like a huge elephant. It's like a huge elephant. We call it the grandpa of the elephant. Get elephants which live right now. And we have a whole body of this animal. Why it is kept? It is found in Siberia. It's a place in the North Pole. These mammoths live on ice, and during a snow avalanche, the snow fall on the mammoth animal, so they are buried inside the ice. The moment of the death is burying at once, in the same time, burying by ice. So the ice prevents the decomposition of the body. The microorganism, we know that all living organism after death is decomposed. What's meant by decompose? The living organism feed on the dead body and try to decompose it into the soil again. So by keeping the mouse under the ice, it is prevent it from decompose. So why it's kept till now? Because it preserved inside the ice. This is the example number 1 in complete fossil. We have another example which is called amper. What's amper? On the old ages, we have a tree called pine tree, This tree secretes resonance matter, a matter look like the glue. And this resonance matter, when it fall on a living organism, it make it stick, solidified. After ages, the living organism inside this resonance matter kept and prevent from decomposed. So it preserved in what? In this resonance matter. If a complete fossil, I have the whole living organism, not a part of it, the whole living organism. The 2 examples we are going to have it, mammoth, which kept in ice or preserved in ice, and number 2, amper, which preserved in the resonance matter formed from the pine. Let's see together. Mammoth, it's extinct, okay, there is no more mammoth from a lot of years, million of years, due to snow avalanche, falling of the snow above them in Siberia. When it died, it rapidly buried in snow, so it prevent it from decomposes, and this is the picture of a true mammoth which we found in Siberia. Now we have the second type, amper fossil. This is pine tree. It secretes resonance matter, cover the insect, and after the resonance matter solidified, it changed into amper. Now we can see that the first picture we have insect inside the amper, and the second one we have a scorpion inside the amper. The minute it died, it buried in the resonance matter, and this resonance matter which secreted from pine tree prevent it from decompose. Let's see the second type. Now we have a complete fossil. The second type is mold. What's meant by mold? It is a replica of internal details of a skeleton of once an old living organism. And this is a picture of them. Okay, let's explain the definition of the mold and the cost and the difference between them. Okay, if I have the replica or a copy of the internal detail, like you are playing in the clay, okay, or like the candle, okay, we have a solid skeleton and we pour the candle inside it. Then you remove the candle from inside. The candle have the details of the internal shape, so it is mold. So what's meant by mold? It is a replica or a copy of the internal shape of the skeleton type. Cast oppositely to it, it is the replica of external shape from outside, the printing of this living organism from outside type. How mold and cast is formed? Now we have a hard skeleton. We must have a hard skeleton like a snail or shell, قوقعة. The living organism inside this snail died, and the snail filled with the sedimentary soil. After a while, the shell itself decomposed, and the sedimentary or the sand inside it, after millions of years, become a solid and leaving the internal details of the snail. So I have a snail internal detail without the shell, which decompose, leaving the details of the shell from inside. This is mold type. When the shell lies at the sand, okay, it print on the sand its shape, okay, like this, الختم. We print it on the sand from outside. Then the shell decompose, leaving what? Leaving its details from outside. This is the cast. So how they are formed? Formed by sedimentary soil, which afterwards the skeleton decompose, leaving the shape. If it have the internal details, we call it cast. If we have the external details, if we have the internal details, we call it mold. If we have the external details, we call it cast. Let's see the definition and the examples. Okay, so we have said mold, replica of internal details of a skeleton once, and this is the two we have. This is what we call it ammonite fossil and trilobite. This is solid mold, ammonite, nemolite, and trilobite. These are the three examples of mold. Internal shape. Cast, replica of external shape, like this. We have a fish that's die, leaving its outer details, and ferns is a type of primitive plant, and leaving the external shape. Okay. Now we are going to discuss the fourth type, the petrification or the petrified fossil. Now we, order to have a petrified fossil, we have skeleton, especially like the trees. From the famous example of petrified fossil, the petrified wood. We have in الطمية the forest of wood. We call it the forest of wood in الطمية. When you look at this forest, you will find that it's full of trees or wood which look like rocks. Is it a tree? No, it's not a tree. It's a rocks, looks like a tree. Why it is fossil? Because it carries the details of the plant. You'll find it as if the plant with details in front of you. What happened? When the plant decompose part by part, a little part decompose, replaced by mineral, and the other part decompose, replaced by mineral. So piece by piece I remove it, replace it with the minerals. The other piece remove and replace it by the mineral. By the end, it takes millions of years, the shape, all of it, the organic matter disappeared, the matter which all found in the living organism itself, and replaced by what? By the minerals which are found in the environment. So what's meant by petrified fossil? It is replacing the organic matter, the original matter of the living organism, by minerals part by part. The part which decomposed, replaced. The part which decomposed, replaced. The example, as we have said, the wood or petrified wood. In this fossil, part of the wood decomposed, replaced by silica, sand. The other decomposed, replaced by silica. Part by part replaced, part by part replaced, decompose, replaced. البارت اللي بيحصل له decompose replaced at once by silica. This took a million of years. So at the end you have the wood, but not made from the organic matter, made from silica or from the minerals in the surrounding. So why we call it fossil? Because it carries the details of the plant. Okay, and this is what we call it petrified fossil. So how many types of fossil? 4 types. Complete fossil, I have the whole living organism like mammoth and amper. Number 2, the mold, replica of internal details. Number 3, cast, replica of external details. And number 4, petrified fossil, which replacing the organic matter part by part with minerals. Okay, now we explain what's meant by fossil, the types of fossil. Now let's have the next point. Importance of the fossil. Okay, Number one, age determination of the sedimentary rocks, and in order to have this we have index fossil. What's meant by age determination and what's meant by index fossil? Now let's discuss or explain first index fossil. Index fossil is a fossil that found live, it's a fossil, يعني living organism, live a short time, but in a wide geographic places, in many places. So when I found this fossil in this place, so the second place and the third place and the fourth place, all these places will be what? In the same age. And we said that the fossil must kept on what? On a sedimentary rock. So it formed in this soil, so they have both the same age. The age of the rock is from the age of the fossil. يبقى the importance of fossil determining the age of the sedimentary rocks, because the age of the rocks is from the age of the fossil. How can I determine the age of the fossil? By knowing the index fossil. And what's the index fossil? It's a fossil, what? Yes, live short period of time in a wide geographic places. So when I found this fossil in Africa and another fossil in Europe and another one in America, all of these three are the same fossil. So this place and this place and this place all have the same age, and the rocks formed in these three places are from the same age. And this is how we can determine what? The age of sedimentary rocks. Okay. Number two, importance, petroleum exploration. Fossil like these two fossil, we call it microfossil. What's meant by microfossil? They are fossil that seen only under microscope. These were living organisms, microscopic, and we have a fossil of them. They are called foraminifera and radiolaria. Again, what they are called, foraminifera and radiolaria. They are example of what? They are example of microfossils. But how can these two fossils help us in explorating the petroleum? If I have a sample from the soil and I examine this sample under microscope, if two these fossils present in the soil, so this place is more properly have a petrol, and I'm going to continue explorating. If there is no, so there is no petroleum in this place. Again, how can fossil help us in petroleum explorating? I have two microfossil seen only under microscope. So I have a sample from the soil, this place. I am going to examine whether there is a petroleum under the soil or not. I'll take a sample, examine it under the microscope. If the sample carried radiolaria or foraminifera, so this place properly have petroleum under it. If there is no evidence of these two fossils, so there is no petroleum, so I'm not going to have more experiment or more digging in this part. The first importance, determining the age of the sedimentary rocks. The second importance is petroleum explorating. The third one is what is figuring pleo environment. It's a new word. What's meant by pleo environment? Let's see the example and we are going to see. We know from the fossil that the mountain of Al-Mu'attab, Jabal Al-Mu'attab, here in Cairo, was a sea floor from 35 million years. The mountain of Mu'attab, Jabal Al-Mu'attab, was sea from 35 million years ago. How we know this? From the fossil. The fossil that we found now in the Jabal Al-Mu'attab is a snail that lived only in what? On a sea. So by finding this fossil in this place indicate that it was a sea once before from millions of years. Number two, the coral fossil. We know that corals must live in what? Must live in warm water and shallow, not at a great depth. So by finding a coral fossil in a place, this place from a million years ago was a sea, warm in water and shallow. It determine the sea floor of جبل المقطم. It tell us that the fern live in warm sea with shallow water. And number 3, if we have fern, we said before that the fern is a plant, live in tropical environment. What's meant by tropical environment? Rainy and hot, استوائية. So by finding this plant or this fossil in this place, it will tell us that this place was before the weather was rainy and hot, and this we call it rainy environment. The importance number 4, it determines the evolution. What's meant by evolution? The oldest fossil live in water. The second one was reptile, then the next one according to the age on land. So by following the fossil, we will find that the life begin on water, then reptiles, which amphibian, which lives in both water and on land, then lived on land, then we have birds and mammals. How we can determine this? We have both of them. Okay. Okay, now we reach the end of our episode. Until we meet again next session. Thank you for listening and goodbye.